Welcome to the Matt Phillips Podcast. I am Matt Phillips, your sales leadership coach, mental toughness expert, and founder of Matt Phillips Coaching. We help sales managers and leaders make more money, save time, and become kick-ass leaders of their sales teams. And that's what we're here to talk about on this podcast. We are here to give you the tools and tactics to build a well-oiled sales machine and teach you the mental toughness skills so you can show up confident, focused, emotionally in control, and ready to energize your team. It's time to talk sales leadership and mental toughness. Let's get into today's episode. Well, welcome back to this week's podcast. Excited to be with you again. And it was really fun. This past week, I had the opportunity to spend about 2 days with one of my clients, specifically their sales team, and travel to New Orleans. And it was actually my first time in New Orleans, which was super fun, and just getting to explore the city and see Bourbon Street and all the sights and sounds. And probably my favorite part of the trip was actually, outside of being with the client, of course, was going to explore the World War II Museum. And so if you ever go to New Orleans and you have not been to the World War II Museum there, it's an incredible place. Just to be able, the way they set it up, what you get to see, the stories that they have presented, the letters that you get to read from actual soldiers, the uniforms, the tanks, the planes, all these things. You can get lost in there for hours and hours. And talking to one guy on the plane right over, he said, yeah, typically if you do it the right way, it takes you like a full day to get through it. Now that's if you're reading everything, doing that sort of stuff. And I didn't have time to do that and spend that much time, but it was just incredible. And it reminded me, we talk a lot on these podcasts about perspective, right? And just having a different perspective, and going through a museum like that, it just provides this perspective of, just don't forget the past. Let's not make, the same mistakes as we did in the past, and learn from it and grow from it. But just incredible what they've created down in New Orleans. So absolutely amazing to spend time there. So outside of my World War II museum experience, we had such a fun time. And part of my role being with this team, I go to all their sales team meetings, is to not only present and take them through different topics, but also to listen and observe. And this sales team meeting in particular, they spent a lot of time with the different leaders presenting their account plans and their focus for 2024, and how we're going to start thinking outside the box and get more sales and generate more sales and lead better and do all these things. And so I was very, very fortunate to be able to sit in the back of the room and watch and video some of these individuals and take notes of kind of how they presented and what went really well and what can be improved, things like that. And my passion as we get into developing great leaders, right? If we want to become the best, our presentation skills, our executive presence has to be like off the charts, right? This is an area where we as leaders need to focus on these skills, because it just separates you from everyone else, right? And I'm sure you've seen those speakers that sometimes they get you so excited and fired up, you're like ready to run through a wall after they're done talking. And there's others that you're kind of like, or maybe they kind of put you to sleep. Like, we've all seen those. We've all experienced those, right? And so obviously in my business, being a speaker, being a coach, it's highly important for me to be able to present myself well and connect with the audience and tell great stories and all those sorts of things. And so part of this podcast, after coming off of that New Orleans trip, I wanted to spend some time sharing some presentation skill feedback, some tips and tricks that I shared with these sales leaders who spoke at that 2-day event, in hopes that it helps you as well. And so I want to take you through, in literally no particular order, some learnings, right? Some observations, things that honestly I've learned from mentors and from others that have helped me along the way. And I think sometimes we think that presentation skills should come naturally, that some people have it, some people don't. And listen, I get some people are more natural, it's more comfortable to speak in front of a group, but it is absolutely a skill set that can be developed, and it must be developed if you want to move up within your organization, or even if you don't want to become manage people. If you want to become a great salesperson, you need to learn how to do this. It's just a huge skill set. So we're going to spend some time talking about these different areas. In pretty much all of these, looking at my list, yeah, all of these I shared with the group last week. So first of all, again, in no particular order, I'll tell you a quick story. I've been in this business for over 11 and a half years now. Love every day, right? I love waking up in the morning and doing this. And part of what I do is I get to go give speeches at different companies, right? And different, industry association events, all those sorts of things. And I remember in particular, because presentation, like getting up in front of a group, I get pretty excited about it, right? And in the past, early on in my career, I would look at it as I'd be nervous, right? I'm nervous to present and all these things. And what I learned is, first of all, it's okay, right? To feel nervous, because it's all about how you look at it, right? There's a story, I hopefully haven't shared this on the podcast before, but if I have, well, you probably need to hear it again. But there's something really interesting. They did a study on Olympians, and they were studying just how they answered questions when being interviewed prior to their events. And I find this so interesting that inevitably, right, if you can picture this, that, the skier's about to hit the slopes and go up and get ready, or they're about to play that basketball game or whatever, but the reporter comes up and asks that person, are you nervous? Right? That's one of the questions, right? You got this event coming up. Are you nervous? And what they studied was that the Olympians with the highest number of gold, silvers, and bronzes answered that question, no, I'm just excited to go compete. Right? So it's really interesting in the way that we look at things, the way we talk about things, the way that we see things from that perspective, right? So the question was, are you nervous? The answer was, no, I'm excited to go compete. And what's fascinating in the study that they did is they talked about the physiological reaction that the people have, right? That when you're nervous and excited, the body has the same physiological reaction, right? That the heart starts to race a little bit. Maybe you start sweating. Maybe your stomach's a little like, I don't know, feeling kind of funny. Maybe your hair stand up a little bit on your arms, right? And that's true if you're nervous or excited. I mean, maybe you can recall some things in your life where you were nervous and switch it to like, and how your body reacted. And when you were excited, what was that like too? It's very similar. It's all about how you look at it. So maybe for some of you today, it's something that when you get in that meeting, when you get in that boardroom, when you get in, do a presentation in front of your peers or your company or your team, that you shift that mental perspective that I'm not nervous about this. I'm excited, right? I know my body's going to react how it's going to react, but I am excited, because when I'm excited, I want to go forward towards those people, right? I want to impact those people. I don't want to hold anything back. When I'm nervous, I want to pull back and pull away. And I've always loved that study and always loved sharing it. And that's why I love sharing it with you, that, again, it's all how you choose to look at it. So back to my story about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, I remember I was pacing around my living room getting ready for a speech the next day. And I practiced a ton. And this thought popped in my head, right? First of all, about how I was so excited for this event to happen, right? But the second thing I wanted to share with you, this perspective shift that I had, this question that popped in my head, this thought that popped in my head, I should say, was, you know what, Matt? This speech you're going to do tomorrow literally has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with you, Matt. I mean, that's what's going on in my head. And what I realized at that moment, and maybe that seems like such a small shift, but for me, it was a massive shift, right? Because what I found out in that moment was, it's not about me, it's about them, right? And when I shift that perspective to go into that and impact that audience, even if it's one person in there, right? Or your team, one person that you can impact and change and inspire and get going, then I've done my job. So my entire preparation shifted from, I have to stand a perfect way or speak a certain way or have this inflection point here or, whisper to bring people in at the right moment. And it shifted from, obviously I tried to optimize that and figure that out, but from worrying about that and not holding me back to, oh my gosh, if I add this little pause in here or if I whisper at this point, that's going to impact them in such a huge way. So how do I craft my message? How do I craft my stories? How do I craft my entire presentation, my slides, everything to impact the people in the room? It was such a massive thing. I think sometimes when we go into present in front of a team or group or association, whatever it might be, we're focused so much on ourselves. I used to do it. I mean, prior to that moment, I was slipping back to like, well, but they're going to like how I dressed, and am I saying the right things at the right time? And I was trying to be perfect with my words, and it was never, ever, ever perfect. And in that moment, when I realized that I'm here to impact them and it's not about me, I'm telling you, everything shifted. All the pressure melted away. I still prepare a tremendous amount because I want the right message to come through. It doesn't shift that, but the pressure goes away because it's about impacting them. It's such a huge thing. So maybe for you today, you need to hear that it's okay. I hope you don't take offense to that. Like I was telling myself that, but it's not about you. It's about your team. It's about your people. And we've heard it before, but once we believe it, like at that moment, I believed it. And I'm telling you, it changed everything from a pressure perspective. There was no pressure because I was now excited to go present because it was about them. When it was about me, that's when I got the nerves. And that's when I was worried about this perfection. So such a huge thing when you're up in front of a group of peers and all those sorts of things and clients and that nature. And what was interesting about this meeting too was it was in front of their peers. And I think sometimes, I don't know, we feel a little more pressure in front of peers because we go in, if you're in sales, right? When you're in front of clients, maybe it's just second nature. You're more comfortable because you've done it over and over and over again. And when you have to present in front of your peers, it shifts a little bit, but it's the same mentality, right? When you're with your client, you're not worried about you. You're worried about how do I help this client be successful? Such a cool thing, but I wanted to share with you that today.
For all you sales managers and leaders out there, I wonder if you've ever thought the phrase, why in the world did I sign up for this? I know I have. And the reality is that leading a team of salespeople can be challenging, right? Just figuring out how to motivate each person and keep the pipeline full and just dealing with the pressure of delivering the month after month results that your company's requiring. And call me an optimist, but admits the challenge, admits sometimes the frustration. We have this opportunity in front of us to really impart our knowledge, right? And to leave that legacy on our team and just achieve next level results. And that's why today I want to personally invite you to our free masterclass training, where I'm going to share the exact secrets, the exact framework that I teach sales leaders around North America to help just take you to next level results for you and your team. And it's actually the exact framework that I taught one of my clients who over a 12-month period tripled organic revenue growth and increased margin by 30%. So I want to invite you to that masterclass. You can click the link below or head over to mattphillipscoaching.com/webinar, and can't wait to see you in the training.
All right. What's the next thing I want to talk to you about? So a couple of very tactical things that I just believe wholeheartedly in. Lapel microphone. You guys know what that is? I don't have mine in front of me right now, but you have a choice every time you present, right? And this is in front of a bigger group, right? But you have a choice to have a lapel microphone, which is right. You can put it on your shirt, or you can have a handheld microphone. And without a doubt, please use a lapel microphone. And the reason is this, right? First of all, I don't know how many times you do, but I rarely do this, that I walk into a room and I've got a handheld mic that I'm just sitting, talking with, and it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, right? So if you're used to using your hands, what we were finding is some people are like pointing at the screen with the microphone and still talking. Well, the microphone's like away from you because you just extended your hand out instead of like having it right here and not moving it. Whereas if you have a lapel microphone, right here on your collar or on your shirt, like you don't have to worry about it. You can do whatever you want with your hands, right? So it's more natural, right? So that's something I shared with this group. Now, a lot of rooms don't need that, but if you're in front of, this was a group of, 50 people, call it, in a room that was decent size where a microphone was needed. And that one little simple thing makes a huge difference. The other very tactical thing I shared was if you don't have a clicker, right, to move slides forward and backwards, go invest in a clicker. They're not that expensive. You can get a fancy one if you want to with a little laser pointer on it, if you want to, point out a certain word on the slide. But go invest in a clicker, right? I would see certain individuals that when they were walking, they had the computer on the podium, right? And in order to advance slides, well, they'd naturally move away because they were engaging with the group, but then it was time to move to the next slide. And what they have to do? Run, kind of walk back quickly and hit the advance button to go to the next slide. Where again, if all I have in my hands, because I have my lapel microphone, is a clicker, and even if you're in a room where you don't need a microphone, cool, still use a clicker. It's huge. That's like next level performance, because at any moment you can just, in your little right hand or left hand, whatever you're more comfortable with, be like, boom, click, boom, it's on to the next slide. Such a simple thing, but huge. It's something that I learned pretty early on in this business, especially giving speeches, but I use it in a lot of different cases where it's a small group. I still have a clicker. Game changer, right? We're looking for little tweaks, little extra little 1%. Huge thing. Okay, let me talk specifically about PowerPoint slides. I heard this speaker talk once, and I really love this. He said, if you ever apologize when you put a slide up to the audience for putting so much on there that they probably can't read it, then probably something is wrong with your slide, right? And I think putting slides together is an art. There's definitely a science to it, but here's some of my guidelines around PowerPoints. Number one, less is more, right? Less is more. So if you need to put something up as a statistic, and maybe you have all this huge Excel spreadsheet that you're putting into PowerPoint or Keynote, whatever you happen to use, I highly recommend that you just put the number on there that really needs to be talked about, or the couple numbers that really needs to be talked about, right? So sometimes people will put up like, well, here's the sales pipeline. And it's this, oh my gosh, so detailed thing, instead of saying, you know what? I've got the sales pipeline, but I want to focus on one area today with you, or two areas with you today. So I didn't include the whole sales pipeline, but these two numbers I want to talk about, and here's why. And then boom, you're off to the races with your talk, right? Again, when you put so much on a slide, one of two things happen. One, people stop listening to you and they start reading the slide. Or two, there's so much that they just stop paying attention altogether. They're not reading the slide, they're not paying attention to you. So it's pulling out, what are the key items that I need to talk with this group about that impacts them, right? It's about them, not you. Talk to them about, to get them to act, think, behave differently for everything that they do. Huge, huge, huge thing, right? But less is always more. Here's the second thing. If you do need that extremely detailed Excel spreadsheet or sales pipeline or whatever you tried to put in there, but you didn't because you're listening today, then you create an appendix in that PowerPoint deck. And you can tell people, well, first of all, you can flip to it right away if you need to. Second of all, you can tell people, listen, I chose to focus on these two today because they're the most important. But when I send out the PowerPoint deck later on, you'll see in the appendix all the detail that you will need. And I'm telling you right now, guarantee people don't read it anyway. They'll be like, oh my gosh, can't wait to see that appendix. They won't read it. That's just the way people work, right? Because we're all busy. We got a lot of stuff going. So that is a huge thing. Less is more. I'm telling you, if you saw any one of my presentations, even if you go through any of our online training programs, right, like that sales manager leadership program or the high performance leadership program, if you go through anything that we do, you'll see all my slides are pretty minimalistic. And it's me talking and explaining and talking about some of the science behind it. Like, it's very minimalistic because I want to engage the audience, not have them get lost in some crazy PowerPoint slide. Okay, so that's something I shared with this group as well. The last thing I really want to talk about today, because I've got so many of these different tips, and maybe I'll do another podcast episode, going through this, but I cannot emphasize enough the importance of preparation and over preparation. And I believe that whether you are, presenting to some room of 1,000 people of peers and part of an association or at a big company or something like that, or you're with your team, and maybe it's a small team gathering, or maybe it's just your company, or maybe it's just your function, the importance of preparation is critical. And sometimes what I see in working with different companies is people over prepare, right? Which is awesome for the outside entities, right? The clients, the people they'll be working with. And then there's a lack of preparation or limited preparation for internal teams. And I want, one of the kind of words that we use quite a lot at Matt Phillips Coaching is consistency, right? There should be a consistency in preparation for any speech that you're giving, any presentation that you're putting in front of people, because you want to be seen as that expert, as that guru. You want people to look at every presentation and be like, dang, he or she prepared for that thing. Like, that's incredible. So I want to emphasize that having the same diligence, preparing days before, weeks before, whatever you happen to do to get ready for that presentation. It's such a huge thing, internal or external. I think sometimes we miss it a little bit. I always, joke sometimes with people that the way, we treat people externally can be, isn't always, but can be different than the way we treat our internal team. Because I think we're just harder on our internal team, right? It's no different than I think we're, at least me, I'm harder on my family than I am sometimes on other people. But we have to have that same diligence when we present, where we have to, again, carry ourselves a certain way, keep them in mind, right? It's not about us, it's about them. And how do we make sure we have got those slides and the talking points and everything nailed before we walk in? It's such a critical thing. So the way I prepare for speeches, there's really a couple different pieces. One, and this is a critical aspect. Before any presentation, I always ask myself, when this is done, how are people walking, talking, thinking, behaving differently? Right? Ultimately, I'm asking myself, when I get done, what does success look like? And it's such a critical question to ask. Whenever I'm coaching people, and I'll put you in touch with people, they've heard this so many times. They're like, hey, I'm putting on this event for the sales team or for the finance team or all this sort of things. And here's what I'm trying to do. And here's the, I think we'll spend a half hour doing this. And I say, well, wait a minute. Like, hold on, pause on the agenda for a minute. Answer this question for me. When you're done with that day, that hour, whatever, how are people walking, talking, thinking, behaving differently? Like, what do you want them to take away? What action do you want them, like, how do you want to inspire them? What do they need to hear? What must they hear? What's success look like? And once you're able to answer that question, that's when you can fill in all the agenda items or talking points that need to be done. And so in March this year, I'll be going back out to Fort Lauderdale with one of my clients. And you better believe that before I put any PowerPoint together, that I'll be A, talking to a number of the leaders, right? Just to understand where things are at, but B, asking that question of myself. So I show up with the biggest impact possible. We have the best discussions that we can to become better leaders and drive results for the business. It's such a huge thing. So make sure you're doing that, right? The second thing I'll tell you is I practice. So once I've got that presentation done, I know what the end goal is, I prepare over and over again. And sometimes my slides are up and I'm like, I don't know, just walking around my living room. Sometimes they're not. And I'm just visualizing being in front of that room of how I'm going to be moving and walking and talking and words I'll be emphasizing and the whispers, like I said before, that we're trying to get across to draw people in. All sorts of little tips and tricks there too. But practice. It just is a huge thing over and over again, right? I found that when you are that practiced, that if something out of the blue comes up, man, that's when you're able to pivot and make that, you're not striving for perfection because you know it so well. But you're able to pivot in that moment. Such a huge thing. And another tip that I'll give you for preparation is I always walk into the room the night before or before everyone gets there, and I will look at where I'm going to be speaking, looking at the setup. I'll move the setup if I need to. I will get myself in a place where I know the room I'm walking into. I'll often take a picture of it. So not only what the stage looks like or where I'm going to be presenting, what that looks like, but also I'll take a picture from the perspective of like, I'm standing up here, where's the audience going to be sitting? What are they going to be doing, right? And whether that's around a boardroom in that little kind of oval, totally cool, take a picture of that. Or whether it's a huge room with all these tables and chairs, great, take a picture of that. But what it helps me do is when I'm going through and rehearsing and practicing, that I'm visualizing, I'm putting myself in that scenario, like pretending like I'm talking to that group of people in those chairs and that person on the right side of the boardroom table. But again, it's just helping you show up focused and locked in. And you've already given the speech in the room because you did it back in your hotel room or at home or in your office. Again, it's practicing to make you have amazing impact with people. So definitely go see the room the night before. We did one video with a friend of mine, another speaker. We were both speaking at the same event. We were in there, and the people were setting it up. So the big stage set up, and we were just walking around talking and asking people like, well, how's this going to look and all this sort of stuff. And we both took a picture of it to make sure we were ready for the next day. So cool. So those are some tips that I shared with, these sales leaders that I wanted to share with you. I think it's such a critical thing, but just remember, listen, if you want to elevate yourself as a leader, separate yourself from other people, if you want to elevate yourself as a salesperson, or just, it doesn't matter, like internally, externally with those people around you, the way you present, I think sometimes is underestimated. It's undervalued. And I'm telling you right now, it is the differentiator. It is the differentiator, because not only does it impact how you give a speech in front of a room, but it impacts how you run every single meeting and interaction, right? That executive presence, the way you show up. So practice this trade, work on these things, go buy your clicker. Make sure that, and ask the question if people have a lapel microphone. Shoot, you can even, like worst case, if you need to, like buy a lapel microphone, and somehow, most people smarter than me, like make sure it connects with the speakers at the place. But if anything else, get yourself a clicker. It's these little things that make a massive difference. So I hope you're able to pick up some good presentation skills, tips, and tricks that you can play with a little bit. But again, coming after this, leaving New Orleans, I knew I had to record this podcast for you, just sharing what I shared with them and what, again, I picked up along the way that can really, really help. All right. With that, thank you so much for tuning in today. Appreciate you as always. Please make sure you tell people about the Matt Phillips Podcast. Share this episode with your team, with your colleagues, so they can learn this as well. And can't wait to see you next week on the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining us today on the Matt Phillips Podcast. If you are like us, we know that you are here to do great things, to become the sales leader that makes things happen and drives big time sales results. We know you have that big vision, and we are here to help get you where you want to go. We're here to help you develop that unstoppable, rock solid leadership skill set and help you train to master the one true differentiator, mental toughness. We would love to be part of your journey. So if you are ready, head over to mattphillipscoaching.com and check out the ways that we can help. As always, please share this episode and make sure you subscribe by clicking the button below. Thank you again. And now, go crush the day.